few months ago, I released a video showing nearly 50 similarities between a screenplay I wrote in 2014 called Little Brother and the 2021 film Malignant. Some similarities are extremely specific, such as both films containing a twist revealing a still-living twin inside the female host and controlling her body. Some similarities are broad, such as both films featuring scenes of hypnotherapy where the female protagonist recounts memories from her childhood when the twin took control of her body, or scenes set at children's birthday parties where the twin caused a disturbance. And yet some similarities are very specific, down to lines of dialogue that appear in both films. The full video showing all the similarities is attached at the end of this video. The first half of this video will discuss how the people in question may have had access to my screenplay and some of the other claims of plagiarism that have been brought against the people in question. So let's begin with the origins of Malignant, according to news articles. To answer the question of how this happened, we have to delve into the origins of Malignant, and in doing so, that leads us to someone named Ingrid Bisou. Ingrid is a model and an actress, and she also married James Wan in 2019. Now, Ingrid only has one other writing credit, and it's this right here, a thing called Super YOLO Show. And Ingrid's only other writing credit, other than the Super YOLO Show, is coming up with the entire story for Malignant.
James and I had always wanted to create something together, and so I started pitching him some ideas. We found this little seed that we wanted to grow together, and he actually fell in love with it. We poured each other into the material, into the story, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
Now, Ingrid has given a few interviews to promote Malignant. So on July 17th, 2021, Ingrid gives her initial electronic press kit interviews for Malignant. Before shooting these interviews, she makes an Instagram post declaring she's uncomfortable giving interviews and saying she's nervous about what she's going to say. She records the interview, and from the brief snippet released, she says,
I have a lot of nightmares and night terrors. So night terrors, it's a little more violent.
Hello?
But they also bring ideas. I can't stop them, and I don't know when they're coming. So put it in a movie.
And that's all that exists right now from Ingrid's EPK interviews, because curiously, on the Warner Brothers press website, they didn't release Ingrid's interviews, despite releasing everybody else's. So then on September 13th, after Ingrid is made aware that we are taking legal action, she posts this on Instagram, saying, I'm terrified of my EPK interviews for Malignant coming out. I said some shit that could absolutely be used in court against me. So from this we could gather that Ingrid's kind of sloppy, but we could also ascertain that she doesn't want her EPK interviews out there for some reason. Okay. So on September 17th, 2021, Ingrid does another interview, this time with Slash Film, and the interviewer said that he was told by Warner Brothers that the idea for Malignant came from a nightmare, and this is how Ingrid responds. No, it actually wasn't inspired by a nightmare. I've seen that narrative going around. I don't know why. So that's what's confusing to me. If Ingrid remembers the EPK interviews enough to say that she said incriminating things in them, how can she play dumb as to where this nightmare narrative originated from? She said it herself in the interviews. She's acting as if she has no idea how this idea got out there, but she was the one herself that at first said this idea originated as a nightmare. Okay, so believe it or not, the first portion of the video that you just saw was shot about 2 years ago. I wanted to release this video right after Malignant came out, but since I was dealing with it legally, I was advised that that wasn't such a smart idea. It's probably still not a smart idea, but here we are anyway. So I wanted to fill you in and tell you about how my court case against James went. But before I do that, I wanted to briefly fill you in on some of the other plagiarism allegations that have been brought against James Wan and his company, Atomic Monster. So, going back to the very beginning, the first instance of plagiarism I was able to find was regarding this film called Den, which came out a few years before Saw. Now, the person who made Den said Saw was a ripoff, and he came up with a list of similarities between the two works. And as you can see, both films are about people who wake up chained in rooms and who are terrorized by a sadistic serial killer. Now, nothing came of this legally. The person making the accusations put the similarities online, threatened to sue, but didn't go through with it. And it's worth noting that it's my opinion that the similarities between these two films could very easily be explained by coincidence. So let's move on to the more serious allegations, and these are allegations that actually made it to court, and that's involving the film The Conjuring. This lawsuit alleges that parts of The Conjuring and its spin-offs, specifically Annabelle, were lifted from the book The Demonologist. Now, this is a complicated issue because James Wan and Warner Brothers were working with Lorraine Warren, who's one of the paranormal investigators at the center of the Conjuring film. However, the lawsuit alleges that Lorraine Warren and her husband Ed had sold their life rights to the author of The Demonologist, whose name is Gerald Brittle. Not only that, but it specifically alleges that large portions of The Conjuring 1, The Conjuring 2, and Annabelle were lifted directly from the novel The Demonologist without Gerald's permission. So Warner Brothers actually tried to get around this issue by claiming that ghosts are real and that the paranormal investigations that were happening at the center of the Conjuring films were real life events that really happened. Gerald Brittle, the author of The Demonologist, said the Warrens are fraudsters, none of this stuff actually happened, and a lot of it was actually an invention of my book, a book that you guys didn't have the rights to. Now, if these allegations are interesting to you, I highly recommend you read the amended complaint filed by Gerald Brittle, which shows just how much of The Demonologist was lifted in making The Conjuring. So one thing that's worth noting in this lawsuit is the issue of access, and that's because early on in this lawsuit, Warner Brothers and James Wan claimed that nobody involved in the making of these films had actually read The Demonologist. And they continued to claim that until one of James Wan's deleted tweets was unearthed, in which he wrote, "I watch/read a lot of scary stories, but fuck, The Demonologist, a true life account of Ed and Lorraine Warren, is the scariest book I've ever read." So the basic gist of the allegations made in this lawsuit were that James read the book and that he disseminated what he read to the screenwriters working on The Conjuring so that they could maintain plausible deniability and say they had never read the book. I wanted to interview Gerald Brittle for this video and hear what he had to say, but he unfortunately died last year. His obituary read in part, "Mr. Brittle was the author of The Demonologist and The Devil in Connecticut. His books were used by Warner Brothers without his consent for the Conjuring movie franchise." This is a poster for a film made in the 80s called Interrogation, and this is the international poster for Malignant. I reached out to the artist who made the Interrogation poster, so I asked him if the makers of Malignant commissioned his work or gave him credit for his poster, and he had this to say. "Yes, it's my project, but no one was buying a license from me. Just stole the idea by changing it a little." Okay, so now that that's out of the way, I want to tell you what happened with my own case. So in terms of access, we pointed to a guy named Ryan Turek, who works at Blumhouse Productions, and with whom I shared my screenplay with in 2017. Ryan passed on my script, specifically saying, Hey man, thanks for your patience on this. I gave it a read, and while it is a wild premise, it's ultimately not for us. Keep me posted on anything else you're working on, however. So Ryan Turek is also an executive producer on the movie Megan, which is produced by jameswan and is written by the credited screenwriter of Malignant, Akilah Cooper. Just so that's clear, that means that Ryan reads my script in 2017, and then all throughout 2018 and 2019, he's working side by side with a screenwriter who happens to write a script that has about 50 plot similarities in common with my screenplay. And on top of all that, Ryan Turek is currently producing about 3 or 4 films alongside jameswan. And as you may have heard, Blumhouse and Atomic Monster are reportedly merging their companies. And we also had an email that was sent to me from another producer in March 2018 saying that he intended to send my screenplay to Judson Scott at Atomic Monster. And again, in another amazing coincidence, Judson Scott ends up becoming a named producer on Malignant. So throughout the legal process, we learned some other things. We learned that Ingrid didn't have her pitch document for Malignant until May of 2018. So their first instance of having any sort of documentation showing that they came up with this idea independently is 2 months after my producer said he was sending it to Atomic Monster. Okay, so that takes us to what happened in my case. So basically, we sued them, and then they denied having access to the script, and then they hit us with an anti-slap. Now, for those of you who don't know, an anti-slap is a motion in law that's designed to stop frivolous lawsuits, specifically ones that target freedom of speech. They argued that Malignant is a story about a woman who's a survivor of abuse, whose body is being controlled by a male twin living inside of her. And because of that, it implicates issues of quote-unquote female autonomy and is therefore protected speech. They used the very essence of the story we were alleging they stole as a weapon against me. Now, the judge in our case didn't seem to be buying it. He said he watched the film Malignant, and he didn't see any evidence that the film implicated issues of female autonomy or was a feminist film. Then their lawyers filed additional paperwork pointing to online blogs and forums where a few select critics talked about the feminist undertones in Malignant. Their lawyers also pointed to some articles that were published after our accusations were made, in which jameswan said he always intended Malignant to be a feminist film. Unprovoked, James just all of a sudden wants to talk about how he always intended for this movie to be feminist, even though it's a movie where the male twin kills about fucking 50 women. So eventually, all these articles are submitted, and their lawyers were able to cross the threshold and prove to the judge that Malignant was in fact a feminist film. And because of that, my case was dismissed. Despite all the evidence that you've already heard, we weren't allowed to pursue the case any further. And so, faced with paying their lawyers' fees, which is what happens when you lose an anti-slap, I had to sign something. I didn't sign anything saying that I can't talk about what happened, though. And that's exactly what I'm doing. That's the point of this video. I didn't make this video to say conclusively that the people in question here stole my film. I just simply thought the number of similarities and the possibility of access to my screenplay was worth sharing. Here is the full list of similarities, so you can make up your own mind. Both works feature a twist revelation that the main female character has her twin brother absorbed inside her in the form of a malignant tumor. Both works have violent murders happen in the first half, and then it is revealed through the twist that the murders were done by the main female character. Both works reveal that the main female character's body was being controlled by the twin/tumor inside of her. Both works have gruesome procedures focused on doctors performing surgery on the twin attached to the body of the female protagonist. In both works, during the surgical procedures, the twin assumes control of the female protagonist's body and uses it to wreak havoc. Both works include a female main character who has nightmarish visions. Both works feature a female main character who is the survivor of a traumatic childhood. Both works have mystery-oriented midsections where we see the aftermath of violent murders and the audience does not know how these people died. Both works later reveal that it was the main female character committing the murders. Both works have an inciting incident where the main female character is the victim of violence at the hands of a man. The jostling the female endures in this violent encounter causes the twin tumor inside of her to awaken. In both works, the female protagonist then stabs the man who is violent with her in the head with a knife. Both works end in a showdown as the female main character's two sides battle as she fights to gain control of her own body. In this final showdown, both works visualize the twin and the female protagonist as separate entities in a vast black space to convey the two sides battling to win control of her body. In the final showdown, someone pleads with the female main character, whose two sides are fighting for dominance. Both works explain the twin tumor as a form of parasitic twin. Both works have the twin emerge from the female main character's body and be visible in the final showdown in the third act. Both works have the twin tumor enact its vengeance by killing doctors that tried to remove it from the female main character. Both works have scenes that take place at children's birthday parties where the main character as a child speaks in tongues. In both works, during the evening of the birthday party, the twin takes over the main female character's body and attempts to use her to stab someone. Both works feature the female main character walk around in a grotesque and distorted fashion when the twin/tumor is controlling her body. Both works have the main female character as well as the investigating police officer discover a decomposed body in a bathtub. Both works give the twin/tumor a motivation of revenge. For example, the doctors hurt the twin/tumor living inside the protagonist, therefore they must be killed. Both works imply that the twin/tumor harbors resentment for being an unloved freak who is shunned by society. Both works have scenes of violence happening to doctors in hospitals at the hands of the main female protagonist as controlled by the twin/tumor inside of her. Both works have the main female protagonist's mother withholding information that holds the key to the mystery. Both works feature scenes of the main female character in a hospital as a teenager recovering from a violent incident from childhood. Both works feature scenes with the female main character as a teenager with a doctor working through trauma caused by the twin taking over her body and making her do things against her will. Both works have scenes where the main female character speaks about a voice inside her head. Both works feature scenes of hypnotherapy, where a therapist asks the female main character to close her eyes and revisit the past. During these scenes, the main female character describes what she sees as she recalls previously blocked memories from childhood. In both works, the hypnotherapy scenes are intercut with flashbacks that reveal the violent things the main female character did in her youth while controlled by the twin inside of her. In both works, the hypnotherapy scene climaxes with the twin taking over the female protagonist's body, causing her to jitter and thrash uncontrollably. In both works, the hypnotherapy scene ends with someone falling from a great height. Both works feature police officers investigating the grisly crimes perpetrated by the main female protagonist after the fact. Both works have the investigating officers arrest the main female protagonist at the end of the second act after they have compiled enough evidence that suggests she was the one committing the crimes. Both works feature a scene where the main female protagonist runs away from something frightening, shelters behind a door, and assures herself by repeating, "It's all in her head." In Malignant, the exact words spoken are,
There's no way. It's all in my head. It's all in my head. There's no one there.
In Little Brother, the exact words spoken as the main female character hides behind the door are, "You're not real, you're the voice in my head, you're in my head." Both works feature doctors restraining the female protagonist in a medical facility as the twin causes her to have violent outbursts. Both works have the twin speak in a gurgled voice when protruding from the main female protagonist. In both works, the main female character and the twin's lips move in unison when the twin is speaking. In the third act of both works, we flash back to the murders we have already witnessed to reveal it was the main female protagonist doing the killings, controlled by the twin inside of her. Both works foreshadow the ultimate revelation by having the female protagonist bleed from the area where the twin will eventually emerge from her body. Both works first refer to the twin as a teratoma, a real-life medical term. In both works, doctors eventually identify the teratoma as an absorbed twin. Doctors in both works say the twin is feeding off the main character's body. Both works indicate that the twin is connected to the main female protagonist's brain. This is used to explain how it's controlling her body. Both works give the twin/tumor spindly arms and a gaunt, ugly face. Both works have the main female protagonist writhe and shake uncontrollably when the twin is hijacking her body to take control. In addition to this, the main female character's eyes roll back in her head when being seized by the twin. And finally, in Malignant, someone says,
"He's been controlling her body like a puppet,"
when describing how the twin is hijacking the main female protagonist's body. And in Little Brother, someone says the exact line, "It's using her body like a puppet."
I think Gabriel is interesting because, Gabriel is just something we've never actually seen before. The way that Gabriel operates, the way that Gabriel originated, the mythology behind him, his powers, and his entire story is something unique, I think, for moviegoers.